You should show that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful evening of See and Learn 2019. Thank you all for joining us, both here at beautiful Queen's Gardens and those on the virtual world of Facebook. Thank you for tuning in with us. We do want to invite you guys to comment where you're watching from so we can know where in the world everybody's joining in from. And if you have a question at the end of the show, please comment with your question, and we'll get it answered by the expert. And all right, guys, we got a very special evening for you. We got generations of scientists joining us tonight. At the end of the program, the founder of See and Learn, Lynn, will be introducing one of the other scientists. First off, do you want to start with our thank yous? So, thank you to Carib Trans for supporting us and making it possible that we can share this with people all around the world and going on Facebook. Thank you, Carib Trans. And thank you to Cat's Eye Cottage for hosting our expert. Really appreciate that. And to New Start Energy, thank you for supporting all of our experts from Stacia and coming out here and sharing their knowledge, their research, and their information with all of us. And another big thank you to Prince Bernhard Culture Funds and the government of Saba. Thank you both for your generous donations and kind support. And a big thank you to all of our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you, everyone, for your support. All right, and that raffle, some of you guys just bought tickets for. You guys want to know what you can win? Yeah, of course. All right, first off, we got the 2-for-1 certificate for 8 days, 7 nights on the Caribbean Explorer 2. It visits St. Martin, Saba Island, and St. Kitts. So pretty awesome. We also have a 2-night stay at Queen's Garden Resort. This beautiful place you guys are hanging out at right now, you guys could be staying for 2 nights for free. Yeah. And we also have 2 round-trip tickets on the Dawn 2 ferry going from St. Martin to Saba. A wine gift basket from Shea Booba, pretty good. And we also have a handcrafted knife by John, really cool. You guys should definitely ask him the story on how he makes that. It's pretty amazing. A 2-night stay at Travel Inn. Stay tuned for where that's from. I'm going to look it up for you guys on the next one, all right? Being authentic here. All right. And Aquamania Adventures. We got 3 raffle prizes from them. Sunset sail for 2 around St. Martin. 2 round-trip tickets on the Edge going from St. Martin to Saba. And we have a dinner cruise for 2 also going around St. Martin. And last but definitely not least, from yours truly on this island, Joe Bean, we have a handcrafted glass art, which will be a mermaid and a seahorse. So thank you to everyone for these beautiful raffle prizes. Yep, only $2 per ticket, guys. And we'll be drawing that at the end of the month on our closing night on October 27th. All right, the moment you guys have all been waiting for. Introduction for our expert tonight who's taking front stage, Miss Hannah Madden. A little bit of background for you guys. Hannah Madden was born and raised in the United Kingdom, then moved to Amsterdam, Netherlands in 1998. In 2006, she moved to Statia, where she began volunteering for Statia's National Parks Foundation, SNAPA, which if you guys have been to our previous presentations, you might know that that is just like Saba Conservation Foundation on this island right here. In 2016, Hannah began working for the Caribbean Netherlands Science Institute, CNSI, on Statia. She is a terrestrial ecologist there and has extensive knowledge of terrestrial species and ecosystems on Statia. Hannah has published numerous articles on a variety of species and is currently in the process of publishing more. Tonight, she will be presenting on red-billed tropicbirds. Please give a warm welcome to Hannah Madden.
Is my mic on? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tiffany. Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thanks to See and Learn for inviting me here. It's really great to be here. So tonight, I'll be talking about red-billed tropicbirds. This is a brief overview of what we'll be talking about. What was that? So I start with a kind of not-so-good news and then end with, hopefully, an amusing story to lighten the mood. So, does anyone know how many species of seabirds there are? Oh gosh. It's not me, I don't know. Does anyone know how many species of seabird there are globally? Anybody? Guess?
2,000?
No? Less? So it's around 360 species of seabird. I don't know what that is, but I'll just keep going. And unfortunately, they're declining. And in fact, they are the most threatened group of birds that is declining rapidly. So if we just look at the first two columns here, we have invasive species and we have bycatch. Those are affecting seabirds significantly. Let's look at the numbers here. So from 1950, the number of monitored individuals went from around 350 million to 2010, we're looking at around 100 million. So you can see that numbers are really dropping. And this is just birds that are being monitored. We don't even know the status of the birds that are not being monitored. If we look at the species that are being affected, the pelagic species, this is the pelagic right here in the black. Those are the ones that are experiencing the most declines. So we're looking at rapid declines, small and declining range, small and declining population, and very small population and range. So that was my depressing news. Now hopefully a bit more cheerful. So there are 3 species of tropicbird, and as the name implies, they're found in the tropics. So we have the red-tailed tropicbird, which is found in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, from Madagascar right across to Australia and over to Hawaii. Have you seen them, Jim? In Hawaii? Yeah. So the estimated population size is between 40 and 80,000. We have the white-tailed tropicbird and the red-billed tropicbird. Those are found in the Caribbean waters and in the Atlantic Ocean. And those are, so the white-tailed tropicbird estimated around 50,000 or slightly more. Now let's look at the red-billed tropicbird. The estimated population size is between just 5 and 20,000. So in the Caribbean, of course they're dotted all around the Caribbean, but the main nesting sites happen to be here on Saba, also on Statia, so I've highlighted these 2 here. And there's a small island off Tobago called Little Tobago, where there's also a pretty large population. And I don't know, Mandy, if you know approximately how many? No. I heard maybe a couple thousand, but I'm not sure. So let's just focus on Saba and Statia. Saba, we estimate that they're around 1,500 to 2,000 pairs. And on Statia, we have about approximately a third of that, so around 500 pairs. Those are conservative estimates. So when we think of the global numbers of tropic birds, anywhere between 5 and 20,000, and you think that Saba and Statia have around 2,000 pairs, we're looking at between 10 and 40% of the global population, just on these two very small islands. So, on Saba and Statia, there were two species of tropic birds recorded. There was the white-tailed tropic bird, which is this one. It's the smallest of the three species. It was recorded in 1890 and also in 1952. Today, it is not present on Saba or Statia. Did anyone who's been here for a long time, has anyone ever seen a white-tailed tropic bird? Mandy, Joe? You have? What year was that?
For quite a few years when I first got here, which was 1990.
Right,
And they would be going into crevices lower
Okay.
to the water, close to the water line.
Okay, so Mandy says around 1990 she saw white-tailed tropic birds
No, and I saw them in continuous years after that.
and continuous years after that. But as of today, this year, it is not listed as present, either on Statia or Saba. So now we have the red-billed tropic bird. This is the largest of the species. It can be quite aggressive. That's why I use gloves. It was recorded in 1937 on Booby Hill, again in 1952, also on Booby Hill, and also on Statia, where it was recorded at White Wall and Pilot Hill, which is where I do my work. So let's talk about the red-billed tropic bird. It's a medium-sized, long-lived seabird. The estimated lifespan is around 20 years. It's a pelagic species, and meaning that it is out in the open oceans. And it only comes to land to breed and to nest. So for about 4 months of the year, it's nesting. And for the rest of the year, it's somewhere. I might show you a map later. They lay just one egg. And they incubate the egg for 43 days. And when the egg hatches, the chick remains in the nest for about 85 days. So it's a long period. Now, there's some debate about the age of sexual maturity, because Mandy has seen them from 2 years returning back to the nesting site. But in the literature, it states about 5 years. So that's an interesting topic that we should definitely look into more. And as I said, there are around 2,000 breeding pairs on Saba and Statia, probably more. So the work that's been done here on Saba, well, Mandy is right here, and it's great to see you again. You were, of course, this date's probably wrong. You were here for a very long period of time, but ultimately your data hasn't been published, to my knowledge.
A
Couple of papers, okay. So we're looking to hopefully publish some of your reproductive success data. Then there was a gentleman called Michiel Buchen. Did anyone meet him? He was the principal of the school in 2011 to 12, yeah. And he was also interested in the natural sciences, so he helped Jim with orchid surveys, and he collected data on tropic birds. And actually it was him who recorded this photo right here with the camera trap. Now you can see that there's a cat going into a nest, and I'll talk a little bit more about the numbers. But this was one of those gotcha moments where we finally were able to determine what was happening inside these nests. Then there's been a couple of students of Dolphy de Brot from Wageningen in the Netherlands, and they were looking at feral cat density and diet, and they were also looking at feral cat removal. So let's look at Michiel's data from 2011 and 12. He monitored 2 nest sites. That was Tent and Old Booby Hill. So at Tent, 38 eggs were laid, of which 32 hatched. 32 chicks then hatched. None of them fledged because they were all depredated by cats. Every single one of them. So that gave us a breeding success of 0. Tent is close to the landfill, and so there were, a number of free-roaming cats that were very sickly. They were really in not good condition at all. So euthanizing these cats actually would put them out of their misery because they were in a terrible state. So for Old Booby Hill, we have better news. 96 eggs laid, of which 83 hatched. Of those 83 chicks, 62 fledged. And that gave us a breeding success of 65%. So that was much better. And part of Dolphy's study was to interview residents of the island to ask them how did they feel about feral cats. And they interviewed both local, Sabans, and also people who are not born here but live here. And in all cases, they felt that it was acceptable to euthanize feral cats. And cats can be sometimes a very contentious issue. You do have these very dedicated cat lovers, but in this case, I think the consensus was, yeah, let's get rid of them. And I think if someone can tell me there has been a feral cat control program, anybody know? Nope. Okay. So once again, there was a nest monitoring took place here on Saba at Tent and Great Level. And unfortunately, a similar story. So, fairly high hatching success. But then here we have 0 chick survival at Tent, of which around 40% was due to cats. And the rest was unknown, so we don't know. But Great Level did quite well. Excuse me?
What is the total survival?
Total survival, that means of the eggs that laid and hatched and chicks that fledged, this is the overall nest survival.
How is it 4% for 10 when there were 0% chick survival?
I am not sure. I'm not sure. I copied that from the report, so we can probably question the authors on that. Good, very good question, yeah. Okay, moving to Statia. If any of you have been to Statia, it's right over there. This is the nest site that I've been monitoring since 2012. So basically we can wave to each other. Saba's over here. And so these are the nest cavities that we've been monitoring. And so they go in kind of, a long line along this coastal area. And the reason for that is that those are the only nests that we can safely access. Those are up to about 50 meters elevation. And anything higher than that, of which there are many, many nests up higher, are just too dangerous for me to access. So this is what we can do with what we have. And we monitor about 100 nests. And for those that were out with us yesterday, you know how challenging it can be doing this kind of field work. And just so you know, we go out every 7 days for the entire breeding season, which is 7 months of the year. So it is not for the faint-hearted.
We were hearing every day.
Each time?
We have to check each nest because you don't know from week to week, something may come in. So for us, what I did was I pulled all of the data from 3 consecutive years, and I ran this in a program called MARC, which is a nest survival model. And this gave us basically the same as what I showed you from Saba. So the incubation survival probability of around just under 50%. The chick survival, which is much higher, just under 80%, and that gives us an overall nest survival of around 40%. So, not bad. So in 2017, we began a rodent control project, and we decided that it would be worthwhile to implement this at the nest site. So what we did was continued our weekly nest monitoring, but we also included some rodent control, which is these bait stations right here. It's a locked container and contains these blocks, which rats and crabs find delicious. And they go in and they eat, and then off they go. So here, this is one of our camera trap images of a rat taking or trying to take an egg. This looks like predation of a chick. And here's a chick that's not too happy. So here's how we monitored the rodent population. We use something called a tracking tunnel, which is a really simple way of monitoring the relative abundance of rodents at the site. You take a piece of cardboard, and we made them ourselves. Take a piece of cardboard, you put some ink in the middle, you put some peanut butter right there, and you put them on the ground, so every 25 meters across the whole nesting site, you put them on the ground and you leave them there for 3 consecutive nights. You have to go back every day, replace and check. But basically what this tells us, these tracks here are rats. So before we started the rodent control, I did an assessment of the rodents at the site, and you can see it was absolutely infested with rats. And then in October we started doing rodent control, and unfortunately this was right after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, so it could have affected some things. But basically, as you can see, throughout the duration of the project, we managed to get that rodent density right down to 0 or between 0 and 5%. So we know that rodent control was very successful. However, we still had failures throughout the nesting seasons, and it was very difficult for us to determine the causes of failure. Even though we had camera traps, it's just not enough. 6 or 10 cameras are not enough when you have 100 nests. So in the majority of cases, unfortunately, we just didn't know what was the cause of the failure. Sometimes the chick rolled out of the nest and we'd put it back, and then the next week it rolled out and then it was gone. So, and sometimes the parents would abandon the egg, or the egg was cracked, but for the most part we just were unable to determine the cause of failure. So again, what I did was I put the data from 2017 to 2019 into this program, and I used it to get some results to see, in the same way that I did with the previous data. We also use covariates such as elevation of the nest, vegetation in front of the nest, treatment at the nest site, and to see what had the biggest influence on the survival of tropicbirds. So unfortunately, we were hoping for a huge increase in survival of eggs. Well, we didn't see that, so the result is about the same, in fact slightly lower. The chick survival was about the same, around 80%, and so it gave us an overall nest success of around 35%, so slightly lower than previous years. And as I say, we did begin this project right after two major hurricanes, so that could have influenced the results. So here,
Did you tie it with just 28, removing 2017? Or is it only 2 years of data? Or
it's just 2 years of data, yeah.
Did you look at the two compared to each other?
Yeah, it's about the same, yeah. So here, the top graph is showing you the daily survival rate of eggs. And what we found from our best fitting model was that eggs are negatively influenced by Julian date. Julian date is just the day of the year. So 1 is January 1st and so on. So you can see that at the end of the year, we have a higher failure of eggs, which coincides with the beginning of the nesting season. And the survival of chicks is really, you can see here that we have quite a high mortality in the first 40 days of the chick's life. And thereafter, the survival increases quite significantly. So it's consistent with our own observations that chicks tend to die when they're smaller, but as they get bigger, the survival increases. So to my knowledge, this is the first rodent control specifically targeted on red-billed tropicbirds. And I'm very cautious to say that rodent control was not effective, because I do believe that, had we had another year, we may have seen different results. So unfortunately, it just depends on funding, and this was the end of the project. We do know that rodent control was effective, but unfortunately, rodent control did not influence the survival of tropicbirds. These were influenced by temporal factors, such as the day of the year or the age of the chick. And we didn't get any predation events on camera. Also, some of the limitations of our project were accessibility. So as I said, we can't access all the nests at the site. We wish we could, and we wish we had had another nesting site that could have been a control, and then we could have compared the two, but we do what we can with what we have, and unfortunately we only have one really good nest site that we can access. So we think that survival of tropicbirds is probably affected by a number of factors, both at the nest site and away from the nest site. Crabs, as I say, the crabs love the poison, and they ate almost as much of the poison as the rats did. We found them inside the boxes, and we found even the little shore crabs as well inside, and these land crabs. So when you do these kind of projects, especially on these islands where some people eat these land crabs, you have to put a moratorium on hunting and eating of crabs. And this created a big stir within the community, and so you do have to make sure your outreach campaign is in place beforehand. It doesn't kill the crabs. No, I forgot to mention, no, it does not kill the crabs. Invertebrates can eat the poison. They're not affected by it, but it accumulates in their flesh. So anything that eats the crab is at risk of secondary poisoning. But within about 3 months, it excretes the poison. Right, we're going to switch gears just slightly. Yeah. So the question was, do the snakes eat the eggs? And we do not believe that the native snake eats the egg, because the racer is very small, has a small mouth, and also I've never seen them at the nest site. So I don't believe that they do. Excuse me?
We've seen snakes at the nest site.
You've seen them at the nest site.
FYI.
Yeah. But yeah. Well, it's possible, but yeah. So my next topic is fidelity of tropic birds, and my question was, do tropic birds experience higher reproductive success when they retain their nest mate and nest cavity? And this is a paper that will be coming out soon in Ardea. So fidelity to your mate or to your cavity can have a result in your reproductive success. So if you were to keep the same mate in consecutive years, you have a better incubation shifts, and you also have a more coordinated chick feeding schedules. Cavity selection is linked to foraging areas, parasites in the nest, predators at the nest site, and exposure to the elements. So you have a nest like this one that's high up on the cliff, but it's quite exposed. Depending on the sun and the exposure, it could overheat the chick, for example. But then you have a nest like this that's nicely tucked away, and it has some shade and some cover. So this might be a better quality nest cavity. Or you have one like this, where you have these two adults and their little chick right there, that seems to be on the ground, and it seems to be in amongst some vegetation. And then we have one like this, which is actually at Zeelandia Beach on Statia, where we have a small nesting population, which is probably one of the worst areas where they could nest, because it's like a sandstone cliff and it's really susceptible to erosion. So with some heavy rain, your nest could collapse. So choosing your cavity and choosing your nest mate could have significant influence on your success. So I ran a generalized linear model, don't worry too much about it, but what I found was that birds that nested in consecutive years were more likely to be faithful to their nest cavity. I also found that birds whose first nesting attempt failed and they made a second nesting attempt were more likely to be faithful to both their nest cavity and their nest mate. I also found that birds that switched the nest mate and cavity did not experience higher reproductive success. So switching gears again slightly, I've been doing a little bit of work on tracking of tropic birds. So we've been deploying these loggers right here. These are small GPS loggers. The battery is approximately 1 week. And we've been deploying them on adults with small chicks, like this little one right here. What tends to happen is that adults with a very small chick, up to around 3 weeks, remain with the bird constantly. So one goes off, gets food, and comes back within a few days. This was the optimal time for us to deploy these loggers. After 3 weeks, forget it. Tropical waters are patchy. They don't have many nutrients. So your food resources can vary. And sometimes, you may have to forage longer distances to get the food that you require. So some birds may alternate between short and long foraging trips. Yeah?
How often are the chicks fed?
How often are the chicks fed? Every day. Every day. Oh, well, no, actually, not every day. Once the parents have gone away, once it's about 3 weeks old, they'll come every day and just go off again. But in the first few weeks, what do you think? Probably, is it every day? Every day.
Feeding by one bird will come in, the female, and then the next day it will be the male, and they alternate it.
Okay, so this map shows a slightly different story, I guess, because this bird, this is one of the maps that we got from one of the birds, and each color represents a different day. So you can see that this bird was actually out for 5 days foraging, and it flew as far south as Dominica. And the squiggly lines represent the bird that's foraging actively, and the straight line represents the bird that's really just in flight, heading probably back to the nest site. So that's a good question. So clearly this one didn't come back every day.
Would that map be would that bird be within the first 3 weeks of the chick?
Yes, this chick was in the first 3 weeks of its life.
Will the other mates go out and do a short forage to feed the birds?
It's possible that the other mate went out and did a short foraging trip and came back, but we only know from this bird, so it is highly possible, yeah.
The long red line is the first day or the last day?
I believe it's the last day. I think so. But I would have to go back and have a look. So here's another map of another bird that was quite surprising. So initially it did a short foraging trip fairly locally, and then it went almost down. Here's Aruba and Curacao and Bonaire. So it went quite a big distance here. And the question is why? Obviously this is not good, and the bird was out. I think we have to look for them every day until the bird returns, and I believe it was about 11 days before the bird returned. So why? Well, as I mentioned, these tropical waters are not nutrient rich, and what happens is when the sea surface temperature rises, the chlorophyll A decreases, and this has an impact on the fish and the prey that tropic birds eat. So as a result, if you're getting smaller prey, you have to go out further and forage for longer, and your range has to then increase. And this is probably what happened with this bird. We don't know because the battery ran out here, but at least we got half a map. But it did return, yeah, because we got back the logger. So I put all the maps together, the maps that we've created so far is around 25, and I put them into this website called MoveBank, which is like a tracking website. You can upload all of your data, and this is what we got. So you can see that almost all of the birds go south, southwest, really not going north much, and they're not going into the Saba bank. So the question is why, and what is there that is so attractive to tropic birds compared with other areas? And so if we check here, this is kind of an zoomed out map, but basically here are the islands, and you have here this ridge called the Avis Ridge, and this seems to be the area where they're foraging. And so this ridge probably has some upwellings and has food availability for the tropic birds. But this is still an incomplete study, so those are just my preliminary guesses. So our next question was, well, where do these birds go when they finish nesting? Because we know that they migrate and they disappear for 7 or 8 months of the year, and then they come right back to the same place. So we have these little devices called geolocators, and you can just attach it to a leg band. It weighs just a couple of grams. We put it on the bird, and it stays on the bird until the bird returns, so it could be up to a year. So we deployed, and this was many years ago, we deployed 18 geolocators, and we retrieved 12, which is pretty good retrieval rate. And of those 12, we got about 6 maps that were useful. So I'm just going to show you a couple. So this bird, this bird really loved traveling. So this guy or girl went almost to the western coast of Africa. And of course, these lines are errors, but basically, it went here far into the Atlantic. And then it came back to Statia.
And it went over land?
Excuse me?
Went over land, Venezuela.
No, I don't think so. I think those are probably, so the geolocators are not terribly accurate. They work on light, and so there's a large margin of error, but basically, you can tell more or less where the bird went. About a year, 8 months to a year. We have a couple more out now, so I'm hoping to retrieve them. This is another bird that also went a fairly significant distance far into the Atlantic. And this bird just decided it liked the Caribbean and decided to stick around, and why not? So this work is ongoing, as I said. We're hoping to retrieve a few more loggers, and from that we hope to get a paper.
Do the mating pairs, do they travel together, or do they just rendezvous back at the nest?
Do the mating pairs travel together or rendezvous back to the nest? I have no idea. It would be great to put geolocators on a pair that's in the nest, but it's so hard to find two birds in the nest at the same time. It's almost impossible.
If you keep going back, you might find one.
It's possible as well, yeah. But we haven't done that, so we're just kind of on an ad hoc deployment thing right now, getting what we can. And so my next question was, what do they eat? Well, we kind of know what they eat, but we decided, let's just save some of the regurgitates. So sometimes when you handle a tropic bird, they regurgitate their food. We tried to prevent that because we don't want the chick to lose its breakfast. But in the cases where it's really not possible, we collected the sample. And so on a good day, you get a nice, almost whole specimen like this. And on a really bad day, you get this blob here. But in any case, we know that they eat flying fish. And for the marine biologists, please let me know if that's not a flying fish, but I think it is. So again, these are pelagic species that they catch, and they plunge dive to around 5 meters. We also got a needlefish inside one of the samples. Those are fish that you often see on the surface of the water. That was a bat, yeah. Reef squid are also a prey of tropic birds, and of course they don't have bones. So how do we know that it's a reef squid? Well, the only thing that's left over is the beak. So you either get that in the regurgitate, or you collect the whitewash in the nest and sift it out and see what you get. And unfortunately, in our beautiful age of plastic, we also collected a very large piece of plastic, over 13 centimeters. And had this bird not vomited, it may well have, caused significant damage to the bird, or even killed it, because it gets stuck in the intestinal tract. So we're in the beginning stages of looking at plastics, and all of these samples that we have, I am hoping that we can work together with St. Kitts University with their lab to investigate microplastics, because this has not been done yet on tropic birds. So there's still a lot to be discovered. So has anybody seen this? Yeah? So imagine you've been foraging for days, you've been halfway to Curacao, you come back, you're exhausted, and then this frigate bird tracks you down, grabs you by the wing or the tail, and you give them a piece of your food. So this is what we call kleptoparasitism. The frigate birds steal food from other birds, and so this is a really unfortunate case of the tough life of the tropic bird, who has been foraging so far and really trying to feed its chick, and then you come back and there's this guy waiting for you. So finally, I just wanted to end on a slightly positive note. For those of you who know where Maine is, this guy has been turning up in Maine for the past few years, and the people, the people that see him or her are absolutely enamored. They just love it. This guy has been hanging out with some flocks of terns who absolutely hate it and don't want him there, and so they just love it. They've never seen anything like this beautiful tropical bird, and what is it doing here? And so one person decided to make a decoy. And what happened was they put it in the water, and then he liked it. And then, oh, hi. And then actually tried. Probably a male. So that really is the end of my presentation. What I wanted to say was, for the future, we of course want to continue the work that we're doing on Statia, and we would love to, I should have written, re-establish the monitoring program, because Mandy and Joe did a lot of work here over the years, but unfortunately there's no one doing it right now. So if there's any volunteers, it's only once a week for 7 months. You did it every day. Wow, Mandy. Okay. So thanks so much for listening, and questions?
If you kill all the feral cats, do the rats increase?
Yeah, if you kill all the feral cats, do rats increase? And I believe that is what happened. From somebody was telling me this is exactly what happened here, is that they reduced the feral cat population. I don't know if that person is here who can help me. And indeed, rats then increased. So that is definitely something to be taken into consideration.
Is there any chance that the rats are only going after the unhealthy eggs, the eggs that are already broken, or the chicks that are, already dead? And that's the reason why you found no difference in, after the rat, after you eradicated the rat population?
So the question was, is there any chance that the rats are going after unhealthy eggs or chicks? And that's the reason why we didn't see an influence of rodent control. I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure. Do you want to? Okay. So I don't. I'll come. I'll come to you. I'm not sure. I don't know. What we do see is that adult tropic birds, they stay with the egg almost all the time. And what we do find is that when they go away, or they're kind of forced to leave the egg for a short time, then rats tend to come in. Because they're quite aggressive, so they could potentially fend off rats. But it's a really hard question to answer. I don't know. Yes?
So both male and female incubate the egg.
Yeah.
Both feed each other when they're incubating. One goes out and gets the food and feeds the other one. And then when you go in and reach into the egg to do whatever you do you have to turn the egg, or is there anything with the positioning of the egg that, like there are with some birds?
The question was, when we do the nest monitoring and the adults take it in turns, and we look at the egg, do we have to turn the egg? No, we don't have to turn it. It doesn't make any difference. What we normally do is we mark the egg with the nest number. So if anything does happen to the egg, maybe it's taken or it rolls out, then hopefully we can find a piece of shell that hopefully has that nest number on it. So that's basically all we do with the egg, besides measuring it. Yeah?
I find it a little hard to imagine that after you've been out foraging for 5 days or more, that there's anything, any food left that's not being digested. How does that work in these birds?
So the question was, it's hard to imagine that if a bird's been out foraging for 5 days, that there's anything left. And that's a great question, and I'm not sure. I assume there is something left because they feed them. And Mandy, do you have any suggestions?
Not really.
No. I mean, there must be something left that they're storing for the chick, right? So they probably use what they need for energy, and then the rest is there for the chick. But I would have to look into that. Well, there might be. I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up.
Do they feed the chicks a regurgitant, or do they have like a whole piece of fish or something?
Do they feed the chicks the regurgitant, or is it an entire piece of fish? Normally, it's a whole fish. Yeah. So we've had cameras inside nests, and we've seen the adult coming in and feeding the chick, and the fish was so big that there was a piece of tail sticking out of the mouth for a couple days. So, yeah, of the chick. Yeah, so it tends to be a whole piece of fish. Yeah. Yeah. And Mandy has seen a lot of regurgitate fed to the chicks as well. Yes.
Bird knowledge. When you distinguish a bird like this versus a coastal bird, what is the determination that this is a coastal bird versus a open ocean bird? I think you get a term. There's only 300 some species left of the.
Yeah, I think it's more about where they. No, well, I don't know actually. I think it's about the areas that they inhabit. So coastal birds inhabit the coastal areas. I think it's pelagic, but it can be both, I suppose. But yeah, coastal species just hang around on the coastal areas, so they depend on these shorelines. Whereas seabirds or pelagic species, they don't depend on anything except a place to nest. Any other questions? Yeah.
When they're out foraging or non-nesting periods, where or how do they sleep?
When they're in the non-foraging period, how do they sleep? Or when they're out foraging, how do they sleep?
Yeah, like if they're out for a 5-day trip.
Yeah.
Or a 3-month trip.
Yeah. I think they bob on the water and have a little nap. I believe that's what they do.
You showed where the birds were going to. They all seem to go to Venezuela first, or so northern South America first, and then off. Like, what's the rationale for going into South America? Because there's a couple that went to Venezuela, one that went to Guyana.
Casinos.
The question was, you mean the migratory maps?
Yeah, they all seem to head to South America, and then they went out to see some.
The question was, it seemed that the birds on these migration routes seem to go to Venezuela or Guyana first, and it could be something to do with the geolocator. It's not exact. It has a very large range of, it's within a very large range. So it's not like a GPS that can give you pinpoint.
There was 3 birds that did the same thing, so maybe one geolocator may have been off, but all 3 of them doing the same thing.
I'm not sure. Excuse me? The fish are tastier in Venezuela. I'm not sure. We still have to look into all of that, and the data are very coarse, so you don't get this fine scale like you do with the GPS loggers. Mandy.
For you, I just lost it. Waiting there. Did you do any collect any data on relaying of eggs that have been lost in the nest?
Did we collect any data on relaying of eggs? You mean a second clutch? Yes, we did. Yes. We did, and so one of the slides was we saw fidelity to the mate and to the cavity when they were doing their second nesting attempt. Yes.
Do any of, if a nesting pair lays an egg early in the season, is there a chance it will lay a second one after the chick is fledged?
Is there a possibility that once a bird has nested once in the season, that it will then lay a second nest? I think it only does a second nesting attempt if the first nest has failed, because they exert so much energy and they invest so much into their single clutch and their one chick that I don't think they really have the energy to do it again. So I think it's highly unlikely. But if that nest fails, especially early in the season, they will usually try again. Yes.
What else do they put stuff in their nest? Bedding? What is it?
Do they put stuff in their nest? No, they don't. They don't do anything to their nest. They don't dig, like some seabirds dig a burrow. They don't do anything at all. They just find a cavity and they use it. So they don't manipulate their cavity in any way. Yeah?
About how you feel about that? Like, does that attract the bird to continue to return there where they may or may not find a mate? Or like, what are the ethical issues with that?
Yeah, the question was about the decoy in Maine. And actually, there's a website related to this, so you can read the whole story. And they just did it once. They just wanted to see what would happen. And they don't want to, of course, tease the bird into thinking that there's a mate there. So they just did it once to see what would happen and then remove the decoy. So yeah, ethically, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't keep deploying the decoy. Yes?
Any other birds on the coastal United States? Is like that bird in Maine the only one that people...
Have tropic birds been found in other areas? Not to my knowledge, but... this is the first one that was, I was alerted to it by a colleague, and he just thought it was a funny story, so he sent it to me. And I thought it was kind of funny, so I put it up there.
How big is this bird?
How big is the bird?
Yeah.
It weighs about 500 grams. And so we classify wingspan half a meter, about half a meter. They have long tail feather. So it's a medium-sized bird. If anyone was out with us yesterday, they got to see the bird close up. And so, it was quite a calm one, but they can be quite aggressive. Yes?
Do you know anything about their vocalizations? What?
Do I know anything about the vocalizations? Not much. No. They make a lot of noise. Mandy, do you know anything about the vocalizations?
Exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, they do this call and they do an alarm call if you get too close, or it's a very shrill, kind of shrieky. But the one yesterday was very quiet, so no one got to hear the wonderful sound of the red-billed tropicbird. Yes?
Before the Europeans got here, what was their natural predator other than feral cats and rats? And
Before the
the crab, but what else?
Yes. So the question was, before the Europeans came here, what were their natural predators? And actually, the answer to that was that tropic birds were a food source for the islanders. So the people that lived here actually ate them. And when we gave this talk the other day in the seniors' home, a lady said, "Well, I used to eat it every Sunday." So rats actually didn't exist on these islands until the Europeans colonized. So rats were not a problem. I suspect crabs coexisted with them for many years. So it's possible that crabs could potentially, predate them. But I don't know. The natural predators, I don't, there probably weren't that many. Question, yeah?
Since there's such limitation to where they breed, are the hatchlings growing and then coming back to where they hatch to breed again the same way turtles do, or do you think it's a learned behavior from other adults?
So the question was, because there are so many limitations to where they breed, do the hatchlings come back to the same place where they were born? And the answer is yes, they do. And Mandy, in fact, recorded one that returned within a couple of years, and you say you've had multiple nestlings that returned.
Do you remember when those came back, the first chicks? I don't know, it was one of the Saba people, and that was 2 years after it fledged.
Yeah, so within 2 years you had nestlings returning that you had banded, and you were able to she was able to identify them as chicks that had fledged a couple years earlier and returned. So just like sea turtles, they do return to their nest site. There was another hand over here somewhere. No? Is that a hand up or no? Okay. Okay, thank you.
So before we lose everyone's attention, thank you, Hannah, very much. Pleasure. And I have just 3 quick things to say before we talk about what's coming up. And the first thing is, thank you to the audience. You have really great, intelligent questions, and it's wonderful to see the engagement with everyone, and hopefully that all makes a difference. So thank you to all of you. And we're not even halfway through the event. I'm not on the microphone a lot, so I want to say thank you to all the behind-the-scenes people. So people have been coming for years to understand what it takes to put this event on, but some people may not. So in our audience, we have Brianna, our school coordinator, former Learn person, thank you. And these girls, Miss Emily and Tiffany, please give them a round of applause. They're working 12 hours a day. We've got some, we're really busy. And some of you may not understand that we're doing presentations like this, the field projects you were on, but we're also working with the senior community, the primary school and high school. So they're dealing with every taxi, all the supplies needed, all these little things, and we've pretty much gone off without a hitch. So let's hear it for these 2 girls. And the real reason I came on the microphone tonight is because tonight's really special, because I got here late, so Hannah has been deferring to Mandy while you're here. But I want to say a special thing that it took 17 years to get you here. But I want to officially, properly introduce to you a lady who had a great influence on me, Sue, Joe Bean, Yvette, and she really taught us all about citizen science. And this is part of why See and Learn is what it is. So and she has been recognized very recently with a Lifetime Achievement Award from which organization? I can't hear her.
Marty Who's Who.
Okay. And, but she's a pretty special lady who lived here for a long time, and we're happy to have her back. And official thank you. If you want to come up, we're happy to have you. Her official name is Martha Walsh McGee, known as Mandy. So take the microphone, lady.
Thank you. And thank you for everything. I made her say she wouldn't do this. But I came down to Saba because my home in St. Croix was destroyed by Hurricane Hugo, and saw the island, met the island people, and saw the Tropicbirds, and it was love at first sight for all of them. And you may see me back here before too terribly long anyway. I'm thinking I ought to be cottage looking. So, but I owe a lot to Lynn and John because they have supported me in all the work I've tried to do. And Joe Bean, Vet Peterson, everyone, was really on board with the projects. And Hannah and I are going to be trying to work together to just seam our data together and perhaps get some real definitive papers. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Another round of applause for Mandy, please. All right, so just a few more things before we head out for dinner. We have a few more upcoming events coming up. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. we have a hike with expert Jim Ackerman, who's sitting right here. Yep, join us at 8 a.m. at the See and Learn tent. Then on Sunday night is his presentation at Shea Booba on orchids. Then on Monday we have another field project, a dive trip at 1 p.m. to do a fish survey with Kimani, who is also here in the back. There he is, yeah, also from Statia. And then Kimani's presentation is at 5:30 at Queen's Gardens again. So join us for that. We'd also like to give a big round of applause for all of our sponsors once again, particularly Queen's Gardens. Thank you. Please stick around afterwards for dinner and drinks. And we'd also like to give a big round of applause for Carib Trans. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful night.
Miami is known as an international community and the hub of trade and logistics for the Caribbean and Americas. A leader in the freight logistics industry, Carib Trans has served the Caribbean region for more than 30 years, with a footprint that has grown from one island to now serving the majority, as well as Central and South America. Carib Trans is an NVOCC, a non-vessel operating common carrier, meaning it has the same responsibilities as a shipper without owning the vessels or planes. Its primary customers, individuals who ship clothing, electronics and other personal items, and occasionally cars.
Most of the stuff that they're sending is because they don't get it there. So for us to provide it on two services, air and ocean, we can give them a choice of how fast you want it. So if you want it really fast, we're going to send it by air, you're going to have it next day, sometimes even the same day.
That on-time service has been the key to Carib Trans' success, whether shipping by air or by sea. The company moves about 5,000 TEUs of freight each year, more than any NVOCC in the region. And since it joined the Saltchuk family of transportation companies a couple of years ago, Carib Trans can offer customers even more shipping options.
Other NVOCCs, they depend on other shipping lines that are not part of their family. So they need to rely on whether they're going to sell or not, whether they are late or not. It doesn't happen to us because it's part of our family of companies. We control the service that we give.
Sí, buenos días, por favor, con Diana.
Quality service is what keeps customers coming back. Customers are treated like family, and when they leave to research competitors, it doesn't usually last long.
They have left and they have come back because they've said that, nobody does it better than Carib Trans. So because of that relationship.
That exceptional service includes consolidation. Customers can have freight sent here and stored for free for up to a month, then consolidated and shipped on to the islands and Americas, a perk for the region's growing small business market. Puerto Rico is an expanding market for Carib Trans, about the size of Connecticut and rich in history and culture. Puerto Rico is home to many pharmaceutical manufacturers, as well as a thriving tourism industry for which Carib Trans moves raw materials and supplies. But serving small businesses is still the company's bread and butter here in San Juan. Businesses like Caldera Café, a local coffee company. Owner Alfredo Rodriguez started growing coffee beans at his mountain farm about 20 years ago. He recently ordered a variety of new equipment for his farm and shop. He uses Carib Trans because it consolidates shipments, which cuts down on the number of times he has to pay the Puerto Rico import tax.
Not many companies want to do that. They want only big cargoes and maybe half container or full containers, but they don't want to consolidate because it's more difficult.
Turning challenges into opportunities is what Caribtrans does. And that includes helping to grow small businesses like Caldera Café by taking the hassle out of shipping.
We can be a gateway to expand their business in the Caribbean and back to the U.S. Wherever they can sell their products, we are also going to be a partner for them.
That customer dedication has made Caribtrans what it is today. Now as part of a larger family with more transportation resources, Caribtrans hopes to grow beyond its current market, offering services to additional Latin American ports and eventually Europe and Asia. But even when it becomes a global logistics company, Caribtrans wants to stay true to its roots, always providing personalized, reliable customer service and a commitment to the communities it serves.